Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
The show is still Early Exchange. If you just joined, you're welcome. And the conversation is about the Democratic Republic of Congo that is right now actively seeking investors to diversify its mining industry in a bid to break the dominance of China. Why would they want to break the dominance of China, and what are they doing to actually encourage other investors? Now, to continue the conversation, we have Sam Orovwuje, who is a public and international affairs analyst in the studio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Blessing.
It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Looking at Congo, earlier on, while having a conversation with the chairman of African International Chamber of Commerce Industry, I asked the question, for a continent where you have many countries with mineral resources, but one challenge seems to be the investment, local investment in the mining industry. Now, this is a country, Congo, where China has been playing the role of the big investor in the industry. But right now, the country wants to diversify and is moving to streamline customs and tax processes to make the sector more investor friendly. I understand that the mining sector is very capital intensive and you need to have certain infrastructure and technology to support it. But over the years, one would have expected that Africa would come of age and be able to handle its mining industry alone. Maybe you could have foreign investors, but not playing dominant roles.
It's a major challenge in when you look at the international configuration and the political economy in Africa, where from colonialism to the present day, we just take our primary product into some other environment for mining. But the case of Democratic Republic of Congo, the Minister for Mines, Kizito Papambala, was saying that there's a need to review the dominance of China in the mining sector. Therefore, there are new custom reforms, tax reform, that seems to diversify the economy with a view to see how they can take advantage of other investors in that sector. So the dominance of China in the mining sector in particular has become worrisome to the government. So they are trying to move away from China. Mind you, DRC, that's Democratic Republic of Congo, is the number 2 or the second producer of copper and cobalt in the whole world. And now we're transiting from traditional energy to new energy. Copper and cobalt are very critical mineral in that sector. Therefore, they are trying to take advantage by trying to see if they can bring other investors to that sector with a view to scaling up the activities.
Now, one other thing that they're also doing is forming partnership with United Arab Emirates to overhaul a key railway line to facilitate mineral exports. This would make it easy for them to move minerals out of Congo. But with some of these crucial metals that Congo has and that some of the African countries have, and you've mentioned that there is a transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy, Africa is still dwelling on primary products, exports of primary products. For some other industries that have developed, for example, the petroleum industry in Nigeria over the years has developed, what would it take to have some form of agreement where there is the transfer of technology, even from the investors, that over time, the countries can now take over these industries by themselves?
Fundamentally, let me start from the last point of your question. Fundamentally, nobody will really give you technology, even though in the policy framework you have the concept of transfer of technology. If you look at the China model that closes door for some time and see how they can benchmark. So for Africa, I think we should be looking in that direction. To what extent can we benchmark some of these key sectors that have been exploiting our minerals and see how we can close our door to some extent and make some massive investment in human resource that can drive that process. But that's a very tall order, the way the international architecture is currently configured. But what is key is that if leaders, particularly in Africa, are very serious with the mining sector or mineral sectors in general, they should find a way to see how those who want to exploit these commodities put investment here up to 90 or to 95% of what they do locally, so that that can impact the development of that sector, rather than just putting them into some level of concentrate. They ship them out for refining, then they bring them back to us as an expensive commodity to purchase. So we need the leadership to drive that process, but the configuration, colonial configuration, has always been a major challenge. But I think some leaders are coming to terms with the fact that we must make some reform to be able to provide economic prosperity for citizens in Africa.
To your point of colonial influence being part of the problem, do you think over the years this has been like a go-to excuse for the failure of leadership in Africa? Because Africa is not the only continent that was colonized.
Yeah, but if you look at other countries across the world that were colonized, they have similar trajectory with Africa. So that is given. I understand your question perfectly, but it's not an excuse. So leadership must wake up to that responsibility. And I'm thinking that some of these reforms, particularly in DRC, that is bedeviled with a lot of tension and crisis because of the mineral resource. There are overlapping drivers of conflict, and mineral is one of them. There are literature that support the tension in Congo that is being sponsored from outside. But that is not an excuse. But then if a minister of mines, Kizito Papakambo, was saying this recently, that this reform trajectory in terms of taxation, so that he can get other new investors, signing a partnership with the UAE to improve on the railway network that can drive those minerals to the coastal cities where they can be exported. So that in itself is a new initiative to push forward a new agenda for development in DRC.
I'm pushing for a new agenda for development. Let's take a turn to Nigeria, that also has minerals. But if we look at the Nigerian mining industry, can we say it's very vibrant in terms of how organized it is, in terms of how the government and the people are benefiting from the gains of the mining industry?
If you make a critical comparative analysis between oil and gas, which is the mainstay of the economy, vis-a-vis other solid mineral, I think there's a clear gap in terms of the regulatory framework, in terms of how that industry is managed. Therefore, in my view, the solid mineral sector is not optimal in terms of regulation, in terms of the receivable from the minerals exploited. So the new minister is trying to do something in that regard. To what extent can this come to fruition is a different conversation. But I think we need to find a way to initiate new reforms that open up that sector, rather than the illegal miners that are playing big in that sector, so that we can have some level of receivable almost at par with oil and gas, so that we can get more money for economic prosperity.
There's a school of thought that artisanal mining is the doorway to illegal mining. Do you agree? Is there a connection?
Well, if you look at it from a conceptual analysis, once something is described as illegal, that means there's no regulatory framework that regulates the practice in that industry. Therefore, once any element is illegal, that means they are changing the system. So what's supposed to come into the national purse is being exploited by some people who may be registered to some extent, but in terms of the value of what they get from those minerals vis-a-vis other mineral is a far cry. So therefore, what is illegal is illegal. So they need to clean up that sector in a way, particularly the way we have the PIA for the petroleum industry. We need to get it clean and remove all those colonial legislation, particularly for those other solid minerals, and see how we can improve on that ecosystem to support the receivable.
Now back to the RC, will it stop, or will the challenges they have with the mining industry stop at having other investors come in? What is the challenge of building the capacity of local investors? Yes, they try to streamline customs and taxes to make it more attractive for investors, but it seems like what they would get more foreign investors.
There's no way a foreign investor will come into a system that you don't even have local investors. So some local interests will be involved in those arrangements. So the percentage of the investment is a different ball game entirely. But then if more investors come into that sector, then the dominance of China will be reduced to some extent. The new players we call it scale up. And when that is scaled up, that will help the citizens in terms of, even when technology is not really transferred, those new investors will bring equipment, will bring money into the system, and that will reflect the economy, and to a very large extent will impact on the citizens. So in that regard, therefore, those reforms agenda are good if it's done in a sustainable manner, so that the benefits that is accrued to that initiative will benefit a greater majority and for the common good of citizens.
Let's take a look at China's dominance. Now, China seems to be the very good friend of many African countries. So they've got businesses in Africa, they have investment, and in so many ways they've supported with loans and other concessions for African countries. But is there something to look at about China in terms of the dominance? There are aspects of their economic moves that Africa should be watchful of. How can a country watch out to ensure that while you have an investor, they do not become dominant over any industry that they're playing in?
The challenge here, like you mentioned earlier in this conversation, is we've not been able to wean herself from this colonial structure. So I think China, compared to the West, their investment portfolio is slightly different, where they give you a lineable funds that you bring into the system and they support you with some kinds of development, unlike the West that just give you loans and aid. But China comes with some element of equity. But the challenge that people have with the Chinese business model is some waiver in terms of the sovereignty of the nation, where the nations are not able to pay some of those money. These people may have to take care of those assets. So that's one of the major challenges. But then we cannot just fold our hand and see that even when China is coming to investment in Africa, and there are no other people that are in specific industry, but what is important is the framework, the policy framework that will help the individual countries that have relationship with China to see how best they can get the benefits of those investments. But if you try to strike a balance, it might be difficult, because why is it that other countries do not have massive investment in those sectors? So I'm sure that, like they say in international politics, no permanent friend, no permanent enemy, but permanent interest. So maybe the interest of Congo is changing in terms of relationship with China, and they see how they can balance their investment portfolio by looking elsewhere to get people to bring money into their country.
Now, something you highlighted is key, the target at sovereignty of nations. There have been cases where there are loans given and they are tied to national assets. Does that suggest an ulterior motive, perhaps maybe an aim to recolonize?
Well, generally, if you look at it from a credit perspective, that's if you want to seek loan, there are certain elements that the person who wants to give you credit wants you to subscribe to. So if you subscribe to those elements, maybe because you're desperate, mind my word, in quote, for development. Therefore, when you sign some of those concession loans, particularly ship loans from India, and they put some waiver and some clauses that you don't take cognizance of, and then when the loans go bad, then they target your national assets, and that has happened in Ethiopia, that has happened in Kenya, and that has happened in Sri Lanka with the Hibatutu seaport that was concession to China. The loan was not paid at a particular point in time. You look at the Nairobi-Mombasa rail line that had same challenge. Look at the Ethiopian rail network as well to Eritrea that has the same issue. So if you look at it from that perspective, therefore, it's difficult that most African leaders, when they go into these negotiations, setting of those conditions precedent to draw down on those loans that are inimical or they are in danger to national interest, they don't take cognizance of that. So therefore, going forward, we must see how we renegotiate this loan and see how we don't put forth those national assets as a condition or as a security if anything goes wrong with those credit facilities.
And I think Nigeria might have learned a lesson given the recent issue between the Chinese company that went for Nigeria aircraft outside of the shores of Nigeria. So it's something that countries of Africa need to be very careful about. Well, for DR Congo, we wish them the best in being able to diversify the mining industry, and maybe that's just a leaf that other African countries can borrow, looking at what they can do to enhance development in the mining industry and as well other industries to grow the economy. Thank you very much, Sam Orovwuje,
Thank you.
who is a public and international affairs analyst, for being here on the exchange today.
Thank you.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.